everyone, my name is Rachel. Welcome back to my channel, and welcome to my most recent reads video where I talk about books that I have read recently that I have either really enjoyed or really not enjoyed. I don't tend to really want to bring up 3-star reads in these kinds of videos, but I'll definitely let you know if I've DNF'd a book recently or hated a book. Actually, in this video, it's going to be all positive, which is fun. I don't have any DNFs or anything to talk about. So I have 6 books I want to mention, and 5 of those are 5-star reads. And the first book I want to bring up is Secretly Yours by Tessa Bailey. Now, I didn't give this book 5 stars. I gave it 4 stars, but I still really enjoyed it and felt that it was worth bringing up in this wrap up. So this is book 1 in her Vine Mess duet that centers around this winemaking family, and the hero of this book is Julian, who is a member of the Voss family, and he is like a starchy, buttoned up history professor, and he's currently working on writing a book, and so he decides to take a leave of absence from his professor job to come back to his hometown and write his book. Meanwhile, we have Hallie, our heroine, who is the opposite of him in every way. She is so sunshiny and quirky and honestly truly chaotic, and she is a gardener. She's hired to do some landscaping work on the Voss family property, and she's had a crush on Julian for years and years, since they were like 14 years old, but it turns out that Julian doesn't remember her right away, so she's definitely crushed by that. But Julian just can't help but be charmed by her and fall for her. And I really enjoyed Julian's character in particular because I feel like he is a pretty unique hero when it comes to Tessa Bailey. I feel like Tessa Bailey writes a lot of like grumpy, brooding heroes, and while Julian definitely has that sort of vibe to him, he is definitely like sweeter and quirky as well, just in a different way from how Hallie is quirky. And I love that he is just obsessed with making Hallie smile. If she is frowning in any way, he is going to eviscerate the person that made her frown. And this was just really sweet. I also liked that there was anxiety representation, given that Julian has panic attacks. This was just a really cute, grumpy sunshine, friends to lovers romance. Definitely recommend. I'm really excited for the second book in this duet called Unfortunately Yours. That one is going to center around Natalie, who is Julian's sister, and that one is also going to have more of a hate to love vibe. I've already read the first chapter of that book, and I'm very excited for sure. So next up, I want to talk about Quarterback Sneak by Candy Steiner. This is book 3 in her Red Zone Rivals series. This is a sports romance series specifically centering around football at this fictional university, and you might recall that I read book 2, which is Blindside, last year, and it ended up being one of my top 10 favorite contemporary romances that I read last year. I love that book so much. Clay Johnson, the hero in that book, he has my heart. That book is just fake dating, lessons in seduction perfection. This book definitely has quite a different vibe. And going into this, I didn't really think I was gonna love it. I thought I was gonna enjoy it, but I didn't have super high expectations going in like I did with Blindside. But this one is about Holden, who is the quarterback, as you can tell from the title, of this college football team. And then we have Julep, who is the daughter of the new coach of the team. She also works in like their rehab program. She seems to be an intern of some kind. I think she studies sports medicine. And at the very beginning of the season, when Julep's father, you know, the new coach, shows up, he tells all the players that they are strictly forbidden from even flirting with Julep, much less dating her. And going into this, I thought that the forbidden element was going to be like kind of relaxed, if that makes sense. Like, I've read a lot of forbidden romances where like that's the premise, where the father is like forbidding people that work for him to date his daughter, and then it really doesn't matter in the end. But I will say, the coach, the dad in this, like, he really is forbidding anyone to even look at Julep in any flirtatious way. I will point that out. So in that way, this book is definitely a forbidden romance. And also, this is a grumpy sunshine dynamic that I really enjoyed. So Julep has transferred to this college, I think it's her senior year, to be with her father, and she is very damaged from her past. Something we learned pretty early on in the book is that Julep's younger sister passed away pretty unexpectedly a few years before, and Julep fully blames herself for her sister's death. So she has a lot of guilt, and she had gotten to a very dark place where she just did not care about herself or going on living at all. But then she started taking pole dancing classes, and through that, it's been a really wonderful way for her to heal and cope with this loss. And then we have Holden, our hero, and because Julep is seemingly so cold and an ice queen, he becomes very sunshiny around her. He isn't normally all that sunshiny of a guy, but he can't help but just want to get under her skin. So there's a lot of really great banter in this. But over the course of the book, they do get to know each other and they start to bond, especially because Holden gets an injury pretty early on in the book and Julep helps him with his recovery. And one thing that really surprised me with this book is how much depth there was to both these two main characters and their relationship with one another. Going into this, I expected a fun sports romance. Blind Side, there was some depth to that book for sure, but it wasn't all that serious of a book overall, in my opinion. And so going into this, I thought this was gonna have a similar vibe. But like I said, both of these characters have tragic pasts, and so mainly because of that, there is just so much more depth with this romance and with this book in general. And seeing these two find healing through each other, and of course there's some really hot steamy scenes because Candy Steiner knows what she's doing with that. I will say it wasn't until well into the second half of the book that I got that 5-star feeling from this book, but it really did get me in the end, and I personally really loved this. So I'm so excited to read Hail Mary. I'm probably gonna read it in May, which is the 4th and final book of this series, because that relationship between Mary and DeLeo was set up very well in this book. Next up, we are gonna talk about my 2 Sophie Lark reads of April. Oh man. Okay, let's start with Snow, which is book 2 in her Underworld series. So according to Sophie Lark's reading order that she recommends, you should read the entirety of her Brutal Birthright series, which I did throughout last year, and then read books 1 and 2 of her Kingmaker Chronicles series, which I will get to in a minute because I finally read The Bully. And then before getting to The Bully though, you have to stop, pause the series, go back and read Ivan and Snow, which are books 1 and 2 of her Underworld series, and then you can get to The Bully. So I did all of that. So very beginning of April, I read Snow, and the reason why it's so important to read Snow right before The Bully is because Snow, our hero of this book, ends up playing a really important role in The Bully. And again, I'll get to that in a minute. But this takes place in St. Petersburg, just like Ivan did, and this one is about Snow, pictured here. He's an underground fighter, and towards the beginning of this book, a Bratva boss comes to him and tells him about this insane tournament going on where if he were to win, he would win all the money he could ever want in life and more. So a lot of this book is following that fighting tournament. And let me just tell you, as someone who is so not into sports in any way, I was so invested in this underground fighting tournament. I was on the edge of my seat the entire time. But anyways, our heroine is Sasha, who has just come back from attending medical school, I believe, in Moscow. But it turns out that Sasha's father owes a lot of money to the same Bratva boss that offered Snow to fight in that fighting tournament. And so to work off that debt, she agrees to become this Bratva boss's doctor, and we see that she has to do some very fucked up things to work off this debt. And so eventually Snow and Sasha meet. What I will say, something that kind of surprised me about this book is that it takes quite a bit of time for Snow and Sasha to meet, but once they do, it's a relatively low-angst romance, and then there's just a lot of other mafia things going on that they're kind of caught in the crosshairs with. And I really enjoyed this. I gave this 4.5 stars. I didn't love it quite as much as Ivan, just because Ivan to me is just mafia romance perfection and like so fast paced, whereas this one I felt was like a little bit slower at points, but I still really enjoyed this. And like I said, you definitely need to read this book before you can jump into The Bully, which is book 3 of Sophie Lark's Kingmaker Chronicles series. If you don't know, this is a spin-off second generation series to the Brutal Birthright series that I mentioned a few minutes ago. So Snow ends up playing a really big role in this, because we see at the very beginning of the book that he ends up being a fighting instructor at Kingmakers, which is a mafia college that all of these mafia kids attend. So we are finally getting Dean and Kat's romance in this third book. And to say that I was hyped up for this book is like the understatement of the year, to be sure, if not the decade. Because so many of my friends have read this series. I feel like I'm one of the last people on BookTube to finally get to the Kingmaker Chronicles. But so many of my friends have just been raving and raving and raving about this book in particular. And after reading The Heir, which is book 1, that one is a love triangle that is also essentially Dean's villain origin story. After reading that book, I was already so invested in his character, so obsessed. He definitely will give you Draco Malfoy vibes. I'm pretty sure Sophie Lark has stated that that character was her inspiration for Dean. Dean is also just like the classic broken, damaged boy. And to see his relationship with Kat grow into something so beautiful when it started off as something so twisted and messed up, like, it's absolutely crazy. Also, this is absolutely Sophie Lark's sexiest book that I have read, at least, and there is a lot of variety when it comes to the steamy scenes in this as well. There are quite a lot of moments that live in my head rent-free. That is all I will say. I also love that there's this other mystery going on that leads into The Spy, which is the next book in this series. I'm definitely reading that in May. So excited to continue on with this series. But yeah, like, what can I say about this book that hasn't already been said by so many of my friends? Like, this book was everything that I could have wanted and more. I didn't expect the directions that this story and this romance went in. It will absolutely be one of my top books of the year. Like, I am already tempted to reread it. Also, the audiobook was absolute perfection. Oh my goodness. The male narrator for Dean, I think his name is Gregory Salinas, like, the perfect voice, literally the most perfect casting they could have done for Dean. So good. So I actually read a non-romance book recently, and I really enjoyed it. That is The Hacienda by Isabel Cañas. This is a gothic thriller horror novel for sure. Definitely will give you vibes of Mexican Gothic and Rebecca, and that's definitely what the inspiration was. I mean, it says that in the blurb, but what's really cool about this Gothic novel is that it takes place in the late 1820s after the Mexican War of Independence, and it takes place at a hacienda. And I just loved setting this kind of creepy Gothic story in this time period and at this kind of house. It was just really cool. I felt like I was there with the characters. I felt that the author did a fantastic job of writing the setting. But basically, we have our main character, Beatriz. She is 20 years old, and she decides to marry this man, Rodolfo, who owns a hacienda quite some distance away from where she lives. Like, she lives in the capital, I believe, of Mexico. And so she mainly decides to run off and marry this man because her home life sucks. Basically, at the very beginning of the book, we see that her father was taken away and executed. And so because of that, her and her mother are forced to stay with some other relatives that do not treat them well at all. At first, Beatriz is very excited about being the mistress of this hacienda. Hacienda kind of reminds me of a plantation. It seems that they tended to grow one type of crop, and in this instance it was a crop that you could make liquor out of, and I can't remember what specific type of liquor it was because it was one that I didn't recognize. But we soon see that this house has a very dark energy to it, and so she goes to the local priest for help. One of the priests is definitely very dismissive of her, but the other priest, his name is Andres, and he's quite a bit younger. He's just about her age. He decides to help Beatriz and to try to cleanse this house of its dark energy. There's a lot of mystery, lots of suspense for sure, lots of creepy things going on. Definitely would recommend it if you really enjoy gothic novels with some horror thrown in, because like I said, things get very, very creepy in this book. And yeah, it was just very solid. I give it 4 stars. All right, I have 2 more books that I want to chat about in this video. The first one is Resting Witch Face by Juliet Cross. Yes, I finally read this book. Oh my god. So this has been out since Halloween, but the audiobook just recently came out a couple of weeks ago, and this is a series that I truly feel you need to listen to the audiobooks because the narrators do that great of a job. But if you don't know, this is my favorite paranormal romance series I have ever read. It takes place in New Orleans, and this centers around these 6 Savoy sisters who are all witches, and it's all of their romances. And so this 5th book, we are finally getting Ruben and Jules' second chance, angsty as hell romance. This is a relationship that has been built up since book 1. So we've all been dying for this romance for sure. And this truly served everything I could have wanted from, like I said, the angsty second chance vibe. But it also served so much more because this book, I feel, had my favorite like mystery suspense plot, because each book of this series definitely has a mystery suspense element to it. But the plot in this book was really interesting, really cool. I really liked that we got to see more of the world that the series takes place in as well, because the 4 books before this were all taking place, you know, pretty much just in New Orleans. We didn't really see anything beyond that. And so given that Jules and Ruben are both leaders in the paranormal community, we see them going on trips together to present a pitch to different covens around the world. So Ruben is a vampire, and we have Jules Savoy, who is the eldest of the Savoy sisters. And like I said, they started dating 12 years ago, but they have a big falling out. And so since then, they've had to work in pretty close proximity with each other. And they both have been pining for each other ever since, but they both felt hurt from their past breakup, and there's just other things getting in the way of them being together. And so I love that pretty much right at the beginning of this book, Ruben goes up to Jules and he's like, I'm done waiting. I want us to be together. Okay, thanks, bye. And he goes on to court her, and he is, ooh, he is swoony, he is sexy. We love Ruben in this house. But I was also incredibly invested towards the end when this suspense plot really picks up. And like, I feel Juliet Cross really went there with both the romance and the plot. I was taken aback. I didn't expect this book to be as epic as it turned out to be. But yes, this was just amazing. I think this is my favorite book of the series so far, though I truly love each and every couple that we've read about so far, and I'm so pumped for Grim and Barrett, which is the 6th and final book, because we will finally be getting Clara and Henry's romance. This is just such a wonderful and cozy feeling paranormal romance series. I love it so much. Last but certainly not least, we have Tattered Stars by Catherine Cowles. This is book 1 in her Tattered and Torn series. And going into this series, I was excited, but I also didn't have super high expectations because I've read one of Catherine Cowles' series before. I believe it was the first series she had ever published. It's the one with like Beautifully Broken Control. Like, all the titles have beautifully in them, and I gave all those books 4 stars, though there was one book in that series that I gave 4.5 stars. Like I almost gave it a full 5 stars, but yeah, that series didn't like blow me away, but it was still a very solid small town romantic suspense series. But going into this one, I had heard quite a few of my friends rave about this series, especially Jess from Peace Love Books. She is Catherine Cowles' #1 fan for sure. And so I really wanted to love the series as much as she does. So we have Hayes and Everly. So when they were quite a bit younger, when Everly was about 11, I believe, she reported to the police that her father had kidnapped this other local girl named Shiloh, and Shiloh is Hayes's younger sister. Okay, so Everly's father was just straight up psychotic, and he kidnapped this girl because he thought that he was saving her from the terrible world, basically, because he's one of these people that believes that the government is out to get you. You should live off the grid. You know, everyone's out to get you, right? And so he truly believed that he was saving Shiloh by kidnapping her, but she was like close to death's door when Everly decided to just go to the police herself, even though she was a kid. She was 11, like I said, and so she ends up saving Shiloh's life. And so Everly's father goes to jail, and Everly's mother passes away, and so her family just like completely disintegrates, and she ends up going to live with some other siblings in a completely different town. And so now it's years and years later, and she comes back to this small town because the property was left to her in her mother's will, and so she decides to rebuild the property as an animal sanctuary. But we have Hayes, our hero. Like I said, he's the older brother of Shiloh, and he definitely has a grudge against Everly and her family. And so when he finds out that Everly is trying to rebuild this property, he is definitely not happy, and he is quite the jerk to her at first. But pretty early on in the book, he realizes the error of his ways, that he really should not put the blame on Everly for what her father did. And, you know, she really did save Shiloh's life. And so over the course of this book I would describe as more of a slow build romance than a slow burn, because to me, the romance doesn't really kick in until after about the 50% mark. But I really loved the way that these two started becoming friends. They started getting closer to each other, and, you know, well into the second half, they start to show those romantic feelings for each other. And I just thought that it was such a sweet romance, but it was also very angsty as well, given their past. And this is definitely romantic suspense. There's quite a bit of suspense in this for sure, which I really enjoyed. I feel like Catherine Cowles balances the two, you know, the romance and the suspense so well. But basically there is someone going around town trying to kidnap women. And so Hayes, being the sheriff of this town, he's trying to solve that mystery while he's also falling for Everly. And yeah, this was wonderful. I gave it 5 stars. I was completely invested in this town, in all of the characters, everything like that, from page 1 to the very end. I loved this book so much that I actually read the bonus scene that Catherine Cowles included at the end of the book. Like, you had to download it separately. Usually I don't go to the effort of downloading bonus scenes, but I loved this book so much that I did. And it was a really great bonus scene, I have to say, because it centered around Everly finally having her animal sanctuary. Really cute. Also, the covers are absolutely gorgeous. Some of the most beautiful covers I have ever seen. So yes, very excited to continue on with this series at some point. So that's going to be it for my most recent reads video. Definitely let me know in the comments below if there are any books that you have read recently that you have really loved and would recommend to me or to other people watching this video. I would also love it if you would leave a like and subscribe, and I thank you so much in advance if you do, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye!